I was sitting in the front seat of the van, feeling the world spin wildly out of control around me. Inside my head, everything was a jumble of noise. All those little warning bells I'd been hearing all week hadn't been for nothing, but I refused to give them the weight they deserved. Everything went off the rails on Tuesday night, when Sally casually mentioned she'd seen a doctor for a yeast infection. She said she'd been prescribed medication and told to avoid intimacy for at least a week. The way she dropped it into conversation felt off to me. After all, it had been years since she'd had a flare-up. She'd learned how to look after herself and keep symptoms at bay. Still, a new alarm started ringing in my brain. I shrugged it off and stayed silent. Earlier that week, probably Tuesday, she'd been distant during dinner, cold and withdrawn. Those bells clanged again in my mind. After we ate, she apologized and went off to rest in the bedroom. I flipped on some mindless TV for a couple of hours before heading to bed. When I went in, Sally was still awake, but the air around her felt icy. She switched off the lights and didn't respond to my "good night, sweetheart." Another warning bell rang, but I chose to ignore it. She stayed detached all week, and I was completely baffled. A few times I tried to strike up a conversation, to coax out what was bothering her, but she dodged my questions with vague answers. I decided it must all be due to her infection and that mid-cycle malaise. Despite a sudden rush of work, I called her Thursday before lunch to suggest meeting up, like old times, but neither her home nor cell phone was answered. That felt strange. Sally, like most women, was always reachable. I didn't leave a voicemail, but that alarm in my head grew louder. I figured we needed a calm moment together to talk honestly about our relationship. I planned to set up a cozy spot over the weekend, where we could have that heartfelt husband and wife conversation. I was even prepared to confess everything I'd done and promise never to stray again. But here I was, stranded in this car, unraveling the truth. Sally had discovered my fling with Tina and, in her rage, concocted a false affair of her own to punish me. That was why she'd kept her distance, inventing flimsy excuses. Sitting here, replaying it all, I realized, yes, I'd given in to temptation and slept with another woman. Sally learned about it from Tina's letter. Instead of confronting me, she chose revenge. She could have simply talked to me and made me admit my guilt. I would have told her how tormented I felt after that business trip. I carried guilt the entire time, certain I should have owned up as soon as I got back. But I stayed silent, thinking it was a one-off mistake that wouldn't leave a mark. I thought sparing her extra pain was mercy. So I buried the truth, and it burst out without my control. Now our marriage was in utter chaos, its future hanging by a thread. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Sally went too far in her vengeance. My betrayal was impulsive, without malice. All she'd done afterward was deliberate, designed to inflict maximum suffering. This wasn't about settling the score, it was pure spite aimed at hurting me deeply. Maybe she'd decided to end our marriage and leave me for him. She said everything was different and wonderful with him. It was easy for her to blame me. "You drove me into his arms." But my mind refused that narrative. Yes, I cheated, but not with the calculated cruelty she'd shown me. I tried to understand why she didn't stop at her imagined payback. Why drag me here and flaunt her supposed infidelity? A confession would have been enough punishment. No need to strip me of my dignity on top of it. But by then, it was obvious that even that wasn't enough for her. She seemed bent on utterly humiliating me and cutting me down to size. My lapse may have jarred our marriage, but her deeds over these last 5 days were even more savage to our bond. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the thought that Sally was taking her revenge way over the line. She went far beyond what any punishment required. After her first day with him, we still might have pieced our marriage back together. But now, I reached into the glove box, grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper, and scrawled a quick message. "Don't come home. We're through. Your ex-husband." That little note nearly shouted at me, "Think twice before you act." Could I really do this? Could I end everything like this? Could I walk away from the woman I believed I loved more than anything? Yet a small voice in my head whispered, did she truly love me as deeply as I loved her? If she did, how could she act with such cruelty? Why had she spent the entire night threatening we might go our separate ways? Had she already made up her mind? Would she come back later, demand our marriage was over, and humiliate me all over again? The decision crystallized. I would beat her to the punch and end our marriage here and now. The memory of her threat to cut my balls off by choosing her lover over me sealed the deal. I climbed out of the van and headed back into the bar. Handing the bartender my note and a $20 bill, I said, "Give this to Sally when she gets back, okay?" He eyed me curiously, No doubt he guessed the note's contents without a word, and pocketed both the paper and the cash. "I'll pass it to her as soon as she returns," he said with a nod. I turned away and stepped back out into the night. A wave of despair hit me like a tsunami, my knees buckled, my mouth turned to dust, and tears sprang to my eyes as I made my way back to the van. Before I pulled out, I drew one last deep breath. If I left this lot, our marriage was finished. If I stayed, my life might become 100 times worse than it already was. The club receded in the rearview mirror until it vanished, and I drove through what felt like a personal hell. More than once I thought of turning around and facing whatever Sally had planned. But my ego stepped in and silenced that weak urge. What's done is done, and there's no undoing it on my part. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my head was a tangled mess. Part of me longed to cling to the past, to my wife and the life we once shared. The other, stronger part began racing ahead. What now? What steps must I take to protect myself, emotionally, legally, financially? What about the divorce? Where would I live? My instinct to organize kicked in. First, secure my safety. Then handle the legal fallout. Next, assert control over the house and bank accounts. And finally, file for a restraining order if I had to. My mind moved at warp speed. Change the locks on the house, top priority. I flipped through the phone book for a 24-hour locksmith, found the number, and dialed. After a couple of rings, a man's voice answered on the other end. I told him I had an emergency and needed every lock in the house changed immediately, no waiting until morning. He warned me there'd be a $100 surcharge for a nighttime call-out and the rush job. I agreed and gave him my address. He said he'd arrive within the hour. My next thought was to make sure Sally couldn't come home and let herself in. She only had the clothes she went out in, so I opened our wardrobe and grabbed our 2 largest suitcases. I shoved in her dresses, jeans, blouses, underwear, a few pairs of shoes, and all her toiletries. The cases ended up unbelievably heavy, but I managed to load them into the van, the one Sally always drove, so that it looked like she just packed and left. I parked it at the curb, left the keys on the front seat, and pocketed the garage remote. Just then, the locksmith pulled up. He took a quick look at the doors and said, "Replacing all 5 locks should take about an hour." "Perfect," I replied, settling in front of my computer. "Let me know if you need anything." He walked back to his truck to grab his tools. I opened my email archive and pulled up the messages Sally had mentioned, those she'd found from Tina. Every single one was there, including my own note to Tina, asking her to stay away. There was no reply from Tina. Whatever fling they'd had was over. Staring at the screen, I wondered why Sally hadn't just come straight to me. Why this elaborate revenge, tearing everything apart? Had something in our marriage really gone so wrong that she'd refuse to talk it out? Was this her grand finale to settle all scores? Suddenly my phone rang. I knew immediately it was Sally. The call went to voicemail, and I heard her trembling voice through the speaker. "Oh my God, Peter, please answer. I know you're there. We have to talk. Don't end our marriage like this. Please, Peter, say something." I didn't pick up, and after a few more seconds of silence, the voicemail ended. Now she was begging for reconciliation, fully aware that I'd made my move first. She must have assumed my conscience would get the better of me and I'd capitulate. But I didn't. Instead, I returned to my computer and, in one swift sweep, transferred every penny from our joint accounts into my personal one. Then I called 3 credit card companies to report our cards stolen, telling them I'd order replacements later. The locksmith came back to say the job was done. He handed me several key sets, and I paid him by check. Now Sally wouldn't be able to get back into the house without my say-so. My phone rang again, Sally trying once more. I ignored it, opened my text editor, and began drafting a 1-page notice. "Sally. Please don't call or knock, I won't open the door. I've packed 2 suitcases with your things, they're in the van at the curb. Take the van and go. When you find a place to live, send me the address and I'll forward the rest. You said our paths were diverging. You made your choice, now walk it alone. Goodbye. Your ex-husband, Peter." Finishing the note, I stared at the screen, the sharp finality of those words sobering me. I closed my laptop, stood up, and braced myself for whatever would come next. I tweaked that notice a few more times before finally printing it out. Then I stuck the sheet to the outside of the front door so there'd be no misunderstanding. I knew Sally would come back and try to confront me face to face, and I wasn't about to let that happen. I walked around the house, double-checking every window and door to make sure they were locked tight. Then I disabled the doorbell, no need for surprise reminders in the middle of the night. Back in my study, I poured myself a generous glass of Jack Daniels. As soon as I settled into my chair and took a long pull, my hand shook so badly I nearly spilled it. Everything inside me felt like it was twisting, and then the tears came. This was no bad dream. Every cell in my body knew it was grim reality. That's when I remembered the envelope and the damp underwear in my pocket. I'd expected a farewell letter, but instead I found photographs, no words at all, just pictures. I flipped through them with clinical detachment, as though I were watching some twisted play rather than reliving our private life. The shots showed her with another man, moments meant only to hurt me. Some images hinted at tenderness, but most were designed to shock, intimate details too raw to describe. With every photo, a fresh ache spread through my chest. These weren't random snapshots, they were a calculated weapon of revenge. It was clear her lover had taken them at her direction, and she'd followed the script without flinching, smashing any hope I had of coming back. For the first time, I wondered about their legal value. They were incontrovertible proof of her betrayal. Instead of destroying them, I sealed the photos in that soiled underwear in a Ziploc bag and locked it in my safe. Then I sat back down at the computer, found every email between Tina and Sally, and without hesitation deleted them all. Within minutes I drafted a new message to Tina at her fresh address. I laid out the whole situation, told her I planned to file for divorce on Monday, and thanked her for those 4 days we'd spent together. I asked her to reach out if she came back to town, and I politely inquired whether she'd deny our affair if Sally tried to use it against me. Finally, I told her to reply to my work email, not to my home computer. I hit send on that email without the faintest idea how it would all turn out. The moment it left my outbox, I clicked delete, and it vanished from both my screen and my sent folder. Tina could play the loyal friend, denying our affair if need be, or she could side with Sally and turn the whole story against me. If she chose the latter, it'd only make my life even more complicated down the road. Still, I needed to see how Tina would react once she realized that the last message she thought was from me had actually been sent by Sally, with her clever little find your way home twist. I wanted Tina to feel for me when she read the full scope of Sally's vindictive plan. There wasn't much left to do that night. I finished my Jack, showered, and was just about to hit the sack when, thump, 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 a pounding on the door rattled the quiet. I didn't even turn around to know it was Sally. Through the wood, I could hear her pleading voice begging me to let her in, to just talk. Her knocking went on for nearly 15 minutes, then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I stayed in bed in total darkness, every lamp and fixture in the house turned off. The silence was so heavy it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then, from outside, I heard the envious growl of an engine coming to life, and moments later the van rolled away. I poked my head out from under the covers and crept to the hallway window. The van was gone. Where had it gone? I didn't know, and truth be told, I didn't really care. Sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned in our marital bed, the very one where Sally and I had shared so many passionate nights. Now the center of the room yawned open, as if someone had ripped out its heart. When I woke Sunday morning, I felt even more battered than when I'd gone to bed. Every muscle ached from tension and stress, and my mind wouldn't quiet. I knew a hardcore workout was in order to soothe my body, but my soul would need far more healing. Cooking breakfast just for myself felt hollow, so I dressed quickly and headed to IHOP. When I walked in, I saw that Sally had added a note to my paper on the front door. "Please, Peter, don't do this to us. Don't end our marriage this way. I still love you and want to remain your wife. Please, we need to sit down and talk this through. Please, call me on my cell phone. We need to talk. Please. Your loving wife. Sally." For a moment, my defenses wavered as I read her words. But then my wounded pride bricked up those walls with fresh doubt. A quiet, insistent voice echoed in my head. Too many questions left unanswered. Too much anger to just let this blow over. Too much hatred to simply ignore. I trusted that voice. My heart might have softened for Sally, but the fact remained, she'd taken revenge beyond any reasonable boundary. I couldn't fathom the depths of her dark thirst for retribution. I read her note again and noticed one glaring omission, not a single "I'm sorry." No regret in those 15 minutes of voicemails either. Why? If she truly wanted to fix things, wouldn't a simple apology have been the first step? Something snapped in Sally last week, something more than just revenge. She'd moved on to outright destruction. I didn't yet know what pushed her there, and I had a long road ahead before I'd find answers. Breakfast hit the spot, I was ravenous, and everything tasted amazing. My mood lifted as I browsed the morning paper. The Middle East was still in flames, The same cycle of hatred and retaliation day after day. Suddenly the idea of a peace settlement popped into my head. Why hadn't Sally tried to make peace between us first? Why this savage need to punish me so cruelly? Why was her love so fragile that one mistake required demonizing me completely? I paid my bill, and the waitress handed me my change with a warm smile. "Have a good day, sir," she said. Would it be a good day? Only time would tell. Heading back, my stomach was full and my mind was already planning the week ahead. Should I file for divorce now or give it a little more time? Rounding the corner, I saw Sally's van parked in front of our house. Definitely not the right time for a face-to-face. I hadn't reconciled my inner turmoil, nor had I forgiven her actions in my mind. So I slammed the steering wheel, spun around, and drove off again. If she wanted in, she'd have to sit in that van and wait for me, just as I'd sat in that bar yesterday. Let her wait as long as she liked. I headed to the gym, changed into workout gear, and reminded myself that an intense session could pull me out of this whirlpool of thoughts, if only for a couple of hours. While I was lifting, I bumped into an old college friend, Frank Keene. We caught up and he told me he'd just finalized his own divorce. My ears perked up. I grilled him on the divorce process and any pitfalls to watch for. After about 30 minutes, he gave me his lawyer's contact info. Finally, I had a clear game plan. On Monday, I'd call that attorney and kick off the divorce proceedings. Then, maybe, I'd find the courage for that inevitable face-to-face with Sally. After my workout, I swung by Fresh Choice for a light lunch, but I still felt the need to unwind a bit more. I climbed into my car and drove to the cinema, choosing Secretariat to take my mind off everything. The movie was exactly the gentle mental cement I needed. When I returned home that evening, I noticed Sally's van was gone. I exhaled deeply as I rolled into the garage and lowered the door behind me. Inside, the house was just as I'd left it. Opening the front door, I found another note from Sally begging me to sit down and talk, but still not a single "I'm sorry." I snapped the door shut, checked the lock, then took a hot shower and swallowed a couple of Excedrin PM tablets. I was ready for bed. My body needed rest to recover, and my mind needed quiet before the week ahead. I slept deeply and woke feeling completely renewed. As I prepared for the workday, I saw my phone's message indicator blinking. Apparently I'd forgotten to check it last night. 2 new voicemails, both from Sally, asking again to meet and talk. Still, no apology, no hint of regret. That's when it hit me, she was deliberately withholding any sorry, trying to keep the burden of guilt squarely on me. It was sad that what had once been a perfect marriage had devolved into blame shifting and avoidance of responsibility. At the office, I instructed Anna, the office administrator, and Alice, my secretary, not to forward any of Sally's calls to me and to turn her away if she showed up. They looked surprised but didn't ask questions. Let them gossip, everyone will know about the divorce soon enough. Around 10 o'clock, I called Frank's lawyer, Larry Finley, and set up our first meeting for 2 that afternoon. I spent the morning on my usual tasks and even skipped lunch because of a tight schedule. At 1:30, I let Alice know I'd be leaving early and left my cell phone on in case of emergencies. As I walked out, she quietly told me Sally had called 4 times that morning. I just nodded and headed for the elevator. The meeting with Larry went well. After discussing his fees, we got down to business. I handed him the photographs and the soiled underwear Sally had left behind. I didn't elaborate on how I'd obtained the evidence, just said she was aware of its existence. Larry paused to clarify a few points, then nodded. Between the photos and my summary of how Sally had fled to her lover, he said he had everything he needed to file for divorce on the grounds of her adultery. I made no mention of my involvement with Tina. I wanted that fact to be a fallback only if Sally tried to use it against me. If both Tina and I denied the affair, only Sally's version would remain. I was still banking on Tina standing by me and backing my denial. Finally, I asked Larry to draft a protective order against Sally so she'd be legally barred from contacting me. He agreed and promised to have the paperwork ready by tomorrow afternoon. Walking out of his office, I felt, for the first time in weeks, that I was back in control. The humiliation of being cuckolded was receding, and my confidence was returning. On my way home, I stopped by the office to pick up reports for tomorrow. When I pulled up to the east entrance, I saw Sally's van rolling out of the north parking lot. She merged into traffic without noticing me. Inside, Alice was surprised to see me back so soon. I just told her I was leaving. I said nothing and slipped back to my desk. As I gathered my reports, Alice handed me an envelope. "This came for you," she said. I slid it into my folder without opening it. I knew she was dying to ask questions, but she'd have to wait. Just as I was about to leave, I remembered to check my email. Logging in, I saw a new message from Tina. Opening it, I read. Peter, I was pleasantly surprised by your letter after that harsh message I received 2 weeks ago. I was really shocked and hurt by that. Now that I know it wasn't you, but Sally behind it, I feel such relief. I'm sorry about the turmoil you're facing because of me, and because of her. It's heartbreaking that your wife was driven by such a thirst for vengeance that she went to these lengths. I'm confident you'll do what's best for you. As for our little affair, my lips are sealed. You can count on me. If I'm ever in your city, I'll definitely let you know so we can meet and talk. Wishing you the best. Your friend, Tina. At last, I had my alibi for denial, the anchor I'd needed. With her confirmation, I could counter any of Sally's claims in court. I quickly sent Tina a thank you reply, told her I looked forward to meeting, and then deleted both email threads without hesitation. I walked to my car in the parking lot and pulled the envelope out of my briefcase, the one Sally had slipped to the office. Its tone was nothing like her earlier, pleading notes and voicemails. This one was brazen and threatening. No more begging to make peace, just a hard ultimatum: meet me or face divorce. Peter. This is your last chance. I've spent 2 days trying to get you to call me and talk in person. You keep ignoring my calls and throwing me out of our home. Either you call me today to set a meeting, or by the end of this week you'll have divorce papers in your hands. This is your only chance. Your wife, Sally. Seeing those words made me smile rather than panic. First she'd begged me to sit down and talk, and now she was blackmailing me with threats. Her fear of divorce had shrunk to almost nothing, since I'd already signed off on our marriage in that bar when I called myself your ex-husband. I thought my intentions were crystal clear. On the drive home, I ran through possible replies to her ultimatum. I could simply ignore it. Divorce papers were already in motion. Sally still couldn't get into the house, and I still held the upper hand. Another idea: I'd suggest a public meeting and hand her the papers myself. That way, I could say my final words face to face and formally end things. I checked outside the house, no van in sight, which pleased me. Behind the lock on the garage door, everything was intact. If Sally really wanted back in, she could have called the locksmith again, but apparently that hadn't occurred to her. My phone buzzed. Another message from Sally. Peter, I left you a note in the office. I hope you read it. If I don't hear from you today, I'll be forced to see the divorce attorney. Her bombshell threatened again, but it no longer detonated me the way it once had. I decided to meet her and hand over the papers. First, though, I needed to eat, and let Sally stew a little longer in suspense. It wasn't until 8 o'clock that I finally dialed her number. After a couple of rings, I heard her familiar, "Hello? Hi, Sally, it's me," I began. Silence. Then she sneered, "I wasn't sure you'd call tonight. Seems my promise to divorce you worked." I felt the urge to slam down the phone, but I stayed calm. "Maybe you should have given me more time. Do you still want to sit down and discuss this in person?" "Maybe I do, maybe I don't, Peter, but I want you to tell me straight that it's over between us. No paperwork drama or cold silence. If our marriage ends, we should do it properly, face to face. We were incredible lovers. If this truly ends, let's end it right." "All right. How about tomorrow evening at Mario's for dinner at 6:30? "That works," she agreed. "Then see you tomorrow," I closed. After her soft "I still love you, Peter," I hung up. Her words sounded heartfelt, but I was already rehearsing my own farewell. The final act of this sad drama would take place in less than 24 hours. With jazz playing in the background and a glass of Jack Daniels in hand, I ran through my lines and questions. For hours, I honed each phrase until I had a solid script for our conversation. Sleep came deeply and quietly. The next morning at the office was routine. I called Larry to confirm the paperwork was ready. He invited me to pick it up after 3:30. A bit before 5, I stopped by his office. The same friendly administrator greeted me at the door and told me Larry wanted to review the delivery procedures and sign-off steps in person. We spent 30 minutes going over every detail of the divorce process. He explained that, once the documents were filed by mutual agreement, finalizing the divorce would take at least 3 months. Now that all the legal machinery was in motion, I felt the familiar calm and confidence returning. I signaled the waitress for snacks and another round of drinks, then leaned back and met Sally's gaze. First, I began, feeling the tension coiling in my chest. This whole situation disgusts me. Yes, I spent that night with Tina, and I'll admit it to you right now, but I was more seduced than scheming. I could have come clean immediately, explained how it all happened, but at this point, it doesn't change anything. Sally's expression flickered between anger and hurt. And you've been blaming me for everything, I went on, yet you planned your own revenge for days. You packed your bags without a word, locked me out, plastered threats on every door and voicemail. You weaponized our private life without ever owning your part in it. Isn't that worth reproach? She blinked, momentarily disarmed. I pressed on. We both betrayed each other's trust. You chose to retaliate with blackmail and public humiliation, photos, notes, legal threats, rather than talk it out. If you really wanted balance, you could have asked me to sit down at any point. Instead, you opted for war. The waitress slipped our snacks onto the table. The warm glow of the restaurant lights felt at odds with the chill between us. I paused to take a sip of my Jack. Sally, I'm ready to end this marriage, but I refuse to be cast as the sole villain, I said quietly. Tomorrow, we'll sign the papers. There's no going back, and neither of us can erase what's been done. But I won't let you rewrite the story so you come out blameless. I watched her for a reaction, and for the first time in weeks, I saw vulnerability in her eyes, fractured by regret and the weight of her own choices. I still care about you, I added softly, but care alone can't undo this damage. Let's finish this with honesty, whatever comes next. I didn't know if my words had broken through or only provoked more pain. But our final act had begun. Tomorrow, at the divorce attorney's office, it would all be over. I leaned forward, letting her words settle between us. The ever-present tension in my chest eased just a fraction, replaced by a hollow curiosity. So that's why you pushed it further, I said softly. You wanted more than a balance, you wanted me to truly feel the sting. I watched her nod, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. And your mother? She encouraged you to teach me a lesson. Sally exhaled, relief and regret mingling in her expression. Yes. I thought if I shattered your world, you'd finally understand what you did to me. I ran a hand through my hair. The logic stung, her pain mirrored mine, but the cruelty of her execution couldn't be ignored. I see now why you did it, I admitted, but your revenge became its own kind of betrayal. Neither of us walked away with dignity.
She looked ashamed, voice barely a whisper. I never wanted this to end like this.
I reached across the table and placed a single finger over hers. Neither did I. My tone was gentle but firm. Tomorrow, we finish this. There's no healing what's been done, only closure. Outside, the light twinkled through the window. Our last dinner together, an ending written in every carefully chosen word. There was nothing left but to sign the papers and step into the next chapter, apart, but finally honest. I stood up, the chair scraping softly against the restaurant's polished floor. I squared my shoulders, looked Sally in the eyes, and let my voice settle into deliberate calm. Sally, I began, each syllable slow and measured, you are an adult. You made your choices, both on your own and under your mother's influence. Yes, Edith fueled your fury. She planted the seed of vengeance, but you watered it and watched it grow. I paused, letting her absorb the weight of those words. The hum of other diners felt distant now, as if we existed in our own charged bubble. You say you were confused, I continued, stepping closer. That your mother told you I would leave you, and that you needed to punish me so I'd learn my lesson. But I trusted you. I gave you the benefit of the doubt, every step of the way, because I believed in us. Not your mother's bitter view of men, but in you. I pressed my hand lightly on the edge of the table. I'm not here to debate Edith's bitterness or resurrect old family grudges. I'm here because you went further than simple retribution. 4 days was grudging enough, 5 days was humiliation. And then you tried to shift the blame entirely onto your mother, as if you had no agency in your own actions. Sally's eyes glistened with tears. I didn't look away. I let her feel the heat of accountability. You chose to keep going. You chose the pictures and the public spectacle. You chose, every time, to push me deeper into this agony. I straightened and took a steadying breath. Tomorrow, we finalize our separation. No more manipulation, no more ultimatums. You claimed you needed to balance the scales. I once believed forgiveness could reset them, but now I see that some rifts can't be mended by balance alone. I gathered my jacket from the back of my chair. I wish it were different, I said quietly, but the love that once bound us has been hollowed out by suspicion and revenge. Tomorrow, at Larry's office, we end this with signatures on paper. Then we each go our way, free from each other's grudges. I offered her one last, steady look. I hope one day you can find peace, without your mother's shadow driving you to destroy what you once cherished. With that, I turned and walked away, each step echoing the finality of our parting. So the 4th and 5th days were your mother's idea? You didn't take part in them willingly, did you? I paused. Sally nodded. So it wasn't the thrill of sleeping with another man that drove you, as you said earlier? After the third day, you fell under your mother's influence and her thirst to humiliate me. Right? Again she nodded. Rage flared inside me. She refused to own a shred of responsibility, gleefully following her mother's scheme of destruction. She wanted to pin the blame for her public disgrace on everyone but herself. I remembered every scene in that bar and afterward, no apology, no remorse. Sally kept her mask of innocence on, shifting all the guilt onto her mother and me. I think you're the real lie, Sally, I snapped loud enough that diners glanced our way. Her face blazed crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. You brought me to that bar on Saturday. You made me the center of your public shame. It was me who received those pictures, no, his pictures, while you paraded my humiliation. I stood and leaned in. You can deny your guilt all you want, but I was there. I heard your own voice, full of threats, we may never find our way back together. Those weren't your mother's words, they were yours. You weren't acting a part, you were plotting your personal revenge. That's why I know it's over between us, I continued. Your loving mask hid a seething hatred fed by your mother. Sally exploded, that's not me, you bastard. Oh, but you're every bit the whore, I shot back. You deliberately orchestrated a fifth day, and I'm certain you would have demanded the right to visit Dan whenever you pleased. Not a trace of regret. You think so? She screamed. Now that I know another man can give me more, Dan won't be the only one. I drew the packet of papers from my pocket. Her eyes widened as she recognized them. I don't need your book, Sally, I said, laying the documents on the table. These are your divorce papers and a protective order, no calls, no meetings, no visits to my home. Cross that line, and you'll go to jail. I want nothing more to do with you. I left two $20 bills on the table and turned toward the exit. Oh, and one more thing, I added over my shoulder, there's an envelope stamped with the address for your new place. Movers will come this weekend, pack up the rest of your things, and store them until you tell them where to deliver. Sally bellowed back, you bastard, I'll show you who really dumps whom. Every head in the restaurant turned. I simply smiled and whispered, whore. On the drive home, I felt a genuine relief, the mystery of the fifth day was finally solved. A thought crossed my mind, if you want to know what your wife will be like in 25 years, look at her mother today. That realization made me smile even wider, better to learn the truth now than decades later. The divorce proceeded without serious complications. Only once did the judge call Tina in for questioning, she calmly denied our affair, and the judge believed her. Sally flew into a rage, and the judge nearly held her in contempt of court. I never saw Sally again after the judge signed our divorce decree nearly 5 years ago. I've never remarried. I date around and have a great time. But whenever a relationship starts to get serious, I ask to meet the woman's mother. A couple of dinners later, I'm always convinced, I'm far more comfortable alone. Thank you, Sally, wherever you are, for that priceless lesson.